And I think that if we're to understand American foreign policy in the 20th century, above all, Wilson's role in the First World War and the creation of the League of Nations, and then Franklin Roosevelt's role in the Second World War and the creation of the United Nations, uh, we can only do so by looking back to a set of values that, in fact, had taken deep root in the United States and with which the founders would not have differed. Uh, what the League represented was a kind of new union that would secure the independence of the nations. Wilson was asked, what if the new peoples constituting these new states in Eastern Europe don't adopt a democratic form of government? And Wilson said, it's none of my business. So what he wanted was a league of peace, a league that would unite the nations on behalf of these principles of sovereignty and independence that the founders had also taken very seriously. That was also Roosevelt's conception of the United Nations. It too was a union for independence, a union on behalf of independence. And I think one could argue that the post-war system of American alliances, particularly those with Western Europe and Japan, had a similar inspiration. That is, they were conceived of as a peace pact. So one way of putting this is to say that the old catechism, what historian Walter McDougall called the Old Testament of American foreign policy, was based on peace, independence, and neutrality. The new dispensation articulated by Wilson and Roosevelt was based on peace, independence, and entangling alliances. The ends remain the same, to secure the independence and sovereignty of the nations. The means were 180 degrees opposite. In the older conception, we secured our peace and independence by staying apart from the European system. Whereas under the trauma of the two world wars, the American conception was that by forming these permanent alliances with others and by taking a stand against the idea of aggression, we could maintain peace in the world. There is a kind of fundamental normative continuity in what they were about, even though there's a radical change in the means. Now, I think one of the most interesting features of American foreign policy in the last 20 years is that we've kind of totally given up on this idea of the independence of nations. If you listen to what Wilson said in justifying the League, he said, we want a world in which the little and the great all have their rights of national independence, and they're free to, be what they can be. Harry Truman, in his The Truman Doctrine, says, we fought the Second World War to prevent a world in which others would control the destiny of other nations, whereas we think their destiny belongs to themselves. And that's the principle that we're going to support. Eisenhower, as I said earlier, said the same thing in his inaugural address. Now, that really came a cropper in Vietnam, because the ideas that we'd had in our head about the European struggle and the need to defeat Hitler and the need to repel Soviet aggression got transplanted to Southeast Asia in circumstances where those neat categories really didn't apply. And that turned out to be a great national disaster and national trauma. But still, the central idea of defending national independence, kind of did continue on. That is what we thought we were doing in Vietnam, even though, in fact, what we were doing was preventing the Vietnamese from unifying and controlling their destiny. In the 21st century, all of that's been, thrown aside. And the apogee of that way of thinking is Bush's second inaugural, in which he pledges the United States to the end of tyranny on earth. Well, that wasn't the conception of the 18th and 19th century, certainly, but it wasn't the conception of the great leaders who took us into the world in the 20th century, especially during and after the Second World War. Um, they recognized, the diversity of political arrangements existing in the world, recognized that each people bore the responsibility for figuring things out for themselves. And in the excess of American power that occurred with the end of the Cold War, and especially then with the Bush Revolution after the 9/11 attacks, those ideas of national independence have been entirely traduced and abandoned. And we've set about violating these principles on a daily basis in the Middle East for about 30 years.